So welcome back to the studio. It's another chilly day, and today we are going to shoot some portraits with the Mamiya medium format camera. One of the things to be aware of when you're using a medium format camera, if you're used to using a 35mm or a digital, is the shallowness of the depth of field. So for the same lens and the same aperture, your depth of field on a medium format camera is going to be a lot shallower. Now that can give you really nice effects. You can throw the background out of focus really well, and you can draw attention to, say, the eyes. If you're taking a portrait, you can just get the eyes in focus. But it does mean if you've not got quite enough light to work with and you're limited in the apertures that you can use, you are going to struggle to get a portrait where the whole of the head is in focus. So you're going to have to find a way around that. You're going to have to get more light. And again, because you're using film, you can't just throw in different kinds of lights and think, well, it doesn't matter, I can sort out the white balance later. That's a digital raw file. You can do that to an extent, not so much with this. So that's something to bear in mind. The other thing I mentioned when I was going through setting up this camera is metering, getting the exposure correct, because there is no metering on this. It's a totally manual camera, so you've got to use a light meter, or I suggested if you don't have a light meter, you could get a digital camera, do the settings as you have here, take a picture and see if it's correct, and then adjust, and then when you know how it should be on the digital camera, you can then transfer those settings to this camera. What I've actually done is, if you just bear with me, I'll grab my mobile phone. I've downloaded an app. I don't know if it's a good app. I don't know if the camera on this phone is good enough to give a good reading, but it was a free light meter app called Lightmate, this one, so I'm not endorsing it in any way. I don't know if it's going to work well, but it seemed fairly simple to use. And basically what you do, you put in your film speed, so I've put in 200, and then you either set your shutter speed or your aperture, then you point it at something, tap the screen, and it gives you a reading as to what the correct settings are. So if I point it at the floor here with 60th of a second as the correct shutter speed, it says yes, you need an f2.8 aperture to get a correct exposure using a 200 ASA film. The maximum aperture on this camera is about 3.7, 3.8. So I couldn't get a 2.8 aperture on this. I would have to go down shutter speed to 1/30th of a second. However, I think 1/60th is about as slow as you can go without getting any subject movement, unless you've got a very good subject who's going to stay completely still. So I'm going to stick with 60th of a second, and maybe it will be a tiny bit underexposed, but I think there's enough latitude in my film stock that I'll be able to deal with that in processing and post-production. One other thing to be aware of, I'm shooting my subject who I'm going to borrow kindly, Lucy. My wife has said that she will just spare me a couple of minutes so that she will sit for me for the purposes of this demonstration. I'm going to be shooting against a white wall. Now if I tap my app here and look at the reading, it's saying for a 60th of a second I need an aperture of f6.7. Now that's because it's wildly underexposing. If you point a camera or a light meter at something white, it just thinks that everything's a lot brighter than it is. So that's worth bearing in mind. Equally, I've got a black door here. If I point it at that, it's saying I need 1.7. So point it again at something between the two, it's saying 2.8. So we're going to go 2.8. We're going to have to go 3.8 and slightly underexposed. We are going to have a very shallow depth of field, so it's going to be interesting. I'm going to try and focus on Lucy's eyes so that they will be in focus, because usually if you are trying to pick one part of the face out, unless there's a particularly prominent or interesting feature, it's the eyes that you want to have sharp. So let's, without further ado, get set up. So I will just pop that down so the camera is as it would come out of the box when you were going to do a shoot. Obviously I've set it up on the tripod here already, and I have popped a piece of card in the back to show the film stock that I'm using so that I don't get confused and use the wrong lighting or the wrong shutter speed. So Lucy, may I borrow you briefly, please? I'll just explain, Lucy is not made up for a photo session, so this is very kind of her to appear unadorned. Right, so Lucy will remain completely still now and will just put up with me messing about. Okay, so first of all, I need to be able to see what I'm doing, so I open up the top here and I need to cock the shutter. It's actually already cocked, but if that lever is not cocked down, I won't be able to see anything, because when you release the shutter the first time, the mirror flips up and it doesn't flip back again as it would on a 35mm camera. So it has been cocked and I can see Lucy in the frame. I've got the camera set to portrait mode, not landscape mode, so it's tall and thin, and there are guidelines in here to show where the portrait and where the landscape things are. And I need to focus it. It looks like it's fairly well focused, but I want to be sure, so I'm going to flip up the magnifying lens here and I will look through there and make sure that Lucy is in focus. So I adjust the focusing with this dial here, and as I said, I need to be very accurate because we've got such a shallow depth of field, and I'm going to focus on the eyes. So I think the eyes are sharp there. I would tell Lucy now, your jacket on that side is flipped over. Could you just turn it over so that it's, yeah. Something to bear in mind as well, if you're working with other people, don't go over and start adjusting things for them. Ask the person to do it and keep a respectful distance, even if it is your wife. So there we go. So yep, that's looking a lot better. It's still all sharp, and what I now need to do is just check the exposure again. So I will click onto my new app and I can get a more accurate reading now. It's saying f4 now, so I think f3.8 is going to be absolutely fine. With this dial you can show the sort of distance the subject is from you. This doesn't actually affect anything, it's just a guide. So then I move on to setting my shutter speed, and I'm going to go for 60 because I think that is the slow shutter speed that I can safely get away with. And then I move down here to the widest aperture, which is f3.8. And then I will remove the dark slide. And now I just need to release the shutter. So I will look through. Lucy, can you just tilt your head just a tiny bit that way? Another thing to be aware of is when you're looking through here, everything is reversed. So if I look and I think the head is tilted this way, I need to ask Lucy to tilt her head the other way because it's a mirror image, it's not corrected. But that's looking good, and now I just need no blink. So can I ask you just to close your eyes for a moment, and then when I count to 3, could you just open your eyes and keep them open for me? 1, 2, 3. And there we go. The picture is taken. And at that point, Lucy can step away. Thank you very much. We're just going to take the one shot. Can you go behind the... Thank you very much. So now what I need to do, first of all, I will replace the dark slide, which is actually quite difficult when I've got it on this tripod because the handle is in the way. I need to recock the shutter to reset it to take the next picture. However, that does not wind on the film as it would on a 35mm camera. But there is a little sign here. There's the red dot has appeared to show that that frame has been shot. If I try and wind on, it won't wind on. Oh no, what am I going to do? What I need to do is release the mechanism by pressing up this metal stud. It clears the red dot and allows me to wind the film on to the next frame. At that point, we are ready to shoot the next frame of film. That's the basics. That's all you need to know for shooting. I'll be back in a different location shortly. Okay, so I'm here in Manchester to get some landscape shots, and I think this area, which I think is about to be completely changed, would be really nice for a portrait orientation landscape with the camera. So I'm going to try and do this without a tripod because it's really difficult to set a tripod up here. So I'm going to set a shutter speed that's quite high so I can be sure of getting a sharp shot even though I'm using it handheld. So I'm going to go for a 250th of a second. So I need to find a decent aperture for that. It's telling me f11. So we'll take the shot at f11. So pop that out. I need to be very careful to make sure that I get this level, because I'm not using a tripod, it could end up a little bit wonky. So I'm going to use the sides of the buildings as a guide to hold it vertical. So one of the things I didn't mention when we were in the studio is the lens that I'm using on this camera. This is a 90mm lens, which is the equivalent of a 45mm lens on a 35mm camera. So I'm getting a field of view that is approximately the same as the human eye. So it gives a very natural effect. You can get telephoto and wide-angle lenses for these cameras, but I've always liked to stick to the standard lens, and you get a really good image that way. I've still got 2 frames to shoot. It's a glorious sunny day. So here I am in Marple. Got my app out again and I check, and it looks like I need a shutter speed of 250 and an aperture of 22. Now I've brought a tripod out here so I can actually put the camera down to get complete stability, and I have my cable release here, so I will be able to release the shutter without creating any vibration at all. So if I open this up so I can check my settings. Okay, so that is the last frame of film. So now I can just wind this film on. You see it's on number 10 now. So keep winding it on. That has completely gone back into the canister. So now what I can do is remove the back, and hopefully when we remove the film from this canister it will not be fogged. There it is. You see it's wound onto the other roll now, and it says on it exposed, because that film is finished. And there should be, if I just release it, a little tab here and I can use that tab to seal the film up. I think that will be sticky back. I'm going to put that in a dark place now and off to the photo lab with it.